On this side of the room? Okay. Again, name and address for the record, please.
Jennings, 18 River Street. I've lived there for 28 years, and I'm here tonight to speak in opposition to this matter before the council. This is kind of a moving target. I'm not a writer or a speaker, so what I've got written here is a little bit different than what I've heard tonight. I wish I could have heard some of this before. Unfortunately, I may be a little redundant with what I'm saying, but this is what I have to say. I think the Webb proposal is bad for the city. What concerns me is the cavalier attitude many have about building on this contaminated site. Let me tell you why I feel I'm qualified to comment on this. I've worked for 35 years in the heavy construction industry as a pile driver. A major part of my job is earth support, so I work in the dirt every day, quite often on contaminated sites. I'm hazmat certified, and at times I'm the guy in the white Tyvek suit with hood, goggles, and a respirator. I've worked on major jobs throughout New England. I've also worked on the Monsanto site in Everett and the Superfund site in New Bedford, both extremely contaminated sites. So let me tell you about who is going to be working on this site. Okay, these guys are going to be ordinary construction workers. They're not going to have suits and ties on. Okay, they have taken a 40-hour hazardous material course. That's all the training that's required, 40 hours. So the safety gear and the monitoring you'll see is primarily for the workers on the site, not the general public or the passers-by or surrounding neighborhood. When I'm on site, I'm most concerned with keeping myself and my coworkers safe. There are many dangers on the job. You have to worry about what's going to kill you right now, not what's going to kill you 5, 10, or 20 years from now. Unfortunately, we're not thinking about tracking mud to or from the job or that contaminated dust that is blowing off site. Airborne dust is a constant problem that is nearly impossible to control, although you might think they can from what you've heard tonight. But in the real world, it's not quite like that. Airborne contamination monitoring is a reaction at best. You only know after there's been a release. But when it's found, no effort is made to collect what's been released. Interesting to note, you heard tonight about when the monitors go off, all construction stops. But who stops the wind from blowing? Once it's in the wind and it's blowing, it's going somewhere. Nobody's going to look for that, and nobody's going to find it because they don't want to find it. In my time in the field, I've never worked on a job site that's as contaminated and as close to many residences as this universal site. It will be virtually impossible to stop contaminated dust from reaching those properties. I'm sure there's residual contaminated dust on those properties right now from the 3 or more previous cleanups. There are people with children who live right next door. This stuff accumulates upon each additional cleanup, and although each release was within acceptable levels, the resulting sum may be above those levels. Unless pre-excavation and post-excavation samples were collected, which I don't think they were, we don't know when the releases occurred or in what amount. Why shouldn't a butter be exposed at all? You dig up a contaminated site like this because you have to, not because you want to. When you have to dig up contamination, it's to mitigate a present danger. The benefits outweigh the risks. This site poses no significant risk right now. The risks to build far outweigh the potential economic benefits to the city. Are these abutters' health and safety worth this small gain? I think not. Now, they're going to track mud from their boots, their clothes, tires of trucks, tracks of machines, and it's going to get spread, it's going to dry, it's going to become dust, and it's going to get airborne. I know they're going to have the track mats for the trucks, but nobody's going to drive on them. I've seen it a million times. Okay, I carry a handkerchief with me at all times. It gives me a good real-time indication of what's in the air. On a job like this, it's going to be full. So why is a little contaminated dust on your property a problem? Have you ever cut your lawn on a hot, dry summer day? You know what happens when you go over that bare spot? A cloud of dust. First you breathe it, then it's on your clothes and boots, gets transported into your house, then gets spread everywhere inside by sweeping and vacuuming. It doesn't take much to contaminate a house. Think about how much time you spend in there. Think about your child dropping that lollipop on the floor and putting it back in their mouth before you can stop them. It's enough to make you go crazy. The problem with a job like this, like Webb's, is that it most likely will be treated like a normal construction job that has some contamination on it. I got that right. not like a hazmat remedial job. The priority will be on the construction end, not the contamination end. This is a recipe for disaster in this location. Now remember, there is no instant way to find out what's in this dirt. Sampling tests take 7 days. In the construction business, time is money. You can't wait. So when an area, I'm almost done. So when an area needs to be excavated for a footing and trucks or dumps are unavailable that day, which happens all the time, the material will be dug up and stored on site. A thin piece of plastic, 6 mil, will be put underneath the pile so it doesn't contaminate the dirt underneath it. Maybe the pile gets covered, maybe it doesn't. Most likely it won't. But the wind will blow at night and it will blow all weekend. The crew will be gone, but the abutters don't have that luxury. Come next Monday morning, after hearing complaints, the piles will get covered. Another reaction, another release, with more contamination sent to abutters' properties. When they ship this dirt back out, it will be dug up with the same excavator that dug it, with the big long teeth. The plastic underneath is ripped through or left behind. Bad dirt is left behind, or good dirt is mixed in. It's a very imperfect system, but that's the way it's done. Now, let me give you a few examples. A few months ago, I was working in Somerville on a site stripped of its pavement. It was windy and the dust was blowing everywhere. One of my coworkers complained of a headache and an irritated throat. So he asked about dust control and what was in the dust. That's the calcium chloride and the misting machine and the other stuff. He was removed from the job that day. You learn not to ask questions in this business, and you learn not to talk. This is the mentality of the construction workforce on a contaminated site. Now remember, these jobs are figured by volume. So let's say there's 2,000 yards of dirty dirt to remove from this site. If at the end of the job these 2,000 yards have been sent out to approved landfills and the numbers match up, no questions are asked. But what percent of that dirt was bad? 0% or 100%? They don't test every truck. It's somewhere in between. So some bad dirt gets left behind, and if that exact spot isn't tested, which it won't be, the dirt is left to dry and blow away. I have dozens of stories of contamination issues on construction jobs, from a coworker's passing out and spending 2 days in the hospital for exposure to carbon tetrachloride in the ground, to the story of 2 Deer Island workers dying of pancreatic cancer within a year of each other. Recently, in Cambridge, we watched while a pile of dirt was literally dragged around the site for a week. Dust everywhere. I asked why they didn't just truck it away. The answer? They were waiting for paperwork. That's code for contamination. The joke on site is that we, the workers, are always the last to know about contamination. But in reality, we are not. The public is. I have even been poisoned by job site contamination exposure. About 10 years ago, I was working in Cambridge on a dusty site. An LSP had determined that the site was not contaminated at the depths that I was working at. After 2 weeks on the job, I was asked to go work on a hot zone on the site that had just been excavated. To work in that zone, I needed to get a baseline blood test, results of which showed extremely high levels of selenium. Imagine that. I guess the site wasn't that clean after all. People do make mistakes. But a mistake like this at the universal site could be tragic. Okay, there is a reason this site is capped, because there are really bad things down there, contrary to what you heard tonight. The site is considered to have a permanent solution presenting no significant risk if used as is. The time to have cleaned this up to a higher standard was during the last cleanup. Unfortunately, that opportunity was missed. It's unfair to abutters to assume any more health risks because of poor planning. The site has a stamp of approval of the Mass DEP and the EPA. Why tempt fate? In my opinion, based on what I know actually happens in the field, the risk of digging this site up again far outweighs any gains. And I'm sorry to say this, but this is what I wrote. This is much like the shooting victim that has a bullet lodged against his spine, and the surgeon concludes that it's too risky to remove the bullet. Sorry, Jane. Please do not allow this site to be reopened.
Thank you. Further speakers on the topic of surplus?